Kia ora and welcome to Baha'i on Air. My name is Kirsten Zemke and we're coming to you from Baha'i Summer School, and we've got a really interesting guest for you for this program. He's an author, teacher, comedian, actor, and all-around interesting guy. So I'd like to welcome Jamie Banks.
Thank you.
And you're from Palmerston North.
Ooh, ouch, that's a low blow. No, I'm from New Plymouth, but of course everyone gets Palmerston North and New Plymouth confused. It's the NPPN thing, but...
And last night when we watched your show here at the summer school, you billed yourself as a half-white comedian.
That's right. That's thanks to a guy called David Liu who pointed out that, because I'd always say that I was half Chinese, you see, and then he said, but you're also half white, and I guess that's a phrase that I hadn't heard very often, so I thought it was perhaps good to label myself that way and make people think about the way they view different races and stuff.
And so at the summer school, what sorts of things have you been doing?
Well, I've been attending lots of sessions and inspiring talks about things from Māori culture to the arts and the importance of youth, and also a bit of Baha'i history in there. And I've also taken a workshop on communication, which was really about connecting with people and using language that we don't normally hear, because I think there are so many cliches out there that we can get very stagnant in our thinking and in our language, and we really need something a bit more inspirational. We need more soul-gripping ways of talking with people, really, if we're going to, have a transformation in society. So.
And you did something at the concert.
I did a little comedy routine.
The worst situation I've had in this was one day, I was walking down a flat road and with my feet, and I heard the cars going by with my ears, and I saw this guy with my eyes, and I said, "Hey man, what are you doing with my eyes?" I said, "Give them back."
And which seemed to go down fairly well. Yeah.
Now, is it hard to do comedy? Some people think, comedy has to be degraded and swear words, and so what do you want to achieve with your comedy?
Well, yeah, that's an interesting point. It is very difficult doing comedy, because you can, for example, if you're playing a song, and if it's an okay song, people can be, go with the flow. But if it's just an okay comedy routine, it feels flat, So you have to perform at a higher level with comedy to make sure that you're, viewed as successful and that people are happy. So, but I also try and use comedy as a way of conveying a message about something, because people tend to listen more if you've made them laugh, you know what I mean? They're more open to ideas if it's associated with humour.
And also I write poems about being single, okay? And I've been writing poems about being single for about 3 years. Yeah. And can I just get an idea? Hands up if you're a single guy out there. Just hands up, please. Hands up high. Okay, girls, look around. There's a lot of... Okay, see, there's a lot of talent on stage, but there's also a lot of talent out there.
So I talk about stuff like being single, and I've been single for quite a long time. And I like to, use that to encourage other people who are single also, and to view that in a different way, and so that they can laugh at themselves rather than moaning about how they, there aren't enough good men or women in the world and that sort of thing. So.
Would you like to leave your phone number here now?
Is that possible? Oh, gosh, done.
So, tell us a little bit more about yourself and, who are you? Who is Jamie Banks?
Oh, that's a big question. Well, I was raised in an all-white family, and because my father, to be honest, who was from the Philippines, sort of left my mother before I was born. He must have known what was coming. And so my grandmother and aunts and uncles and cousins and obviously my mother were completely white, and I was this little Asian guy, and my family were, they weren't completely clued up on genetics and stuff, and they were wondering, what's he going to look like? Is he going to be this red-haired, blue-eyed Chinaman or what? Because, my mum had red hair and blue eyes, and so they were sort of peering around to see what I would be like, and I think they were a little bit disappointed. But I do have this one red whisker that comes out and one red hair as well. Genetics is a wonderful thing.
This is in New Plymouth?
Yes, it is, yeah. And of course in New Plymouth there are hardly any people of Asian descent there. So I was, called all sorts of names at school, and it was very confusing because I felt white, completely white on the inside. and yet, yeah, people viewed me as this Chinese guy.
I actually noticed on the way up here, I heard people muttering, and I heard some people saying, "Oh, look at that young half-white man up there." And I heard other people saying, "Oh, look at that old Asian fella up there."
So automatically I was exposed to racism from a young age, and it didn't really bother me, to be honest, but I felt something was a bit weird there.
And so then at some point in your life you became aware of the Baha'i Faith.
Yes, I was at Spotswood College in New Plymouth, and there was a teacher who was a Baha'i there, very, very inspirational guy by the name of Mervyn Chivers. And he had Baha'i Club at school, and he was the only teacher who allowed students into his classroom at lunchtimes. All the other teachers kicked the students out because they didn't want their rooms to be messed up and so on. But the only exception he had to that was on Tuesdays for Baha'i Club at school, and I was very, very anti-religion, I must say. And I thought it was a crutch and stuff like, the usual cliches that you hear. And but on one particular Baha'i Club day, it was really, really cold outside. And as you can see, I don't have a lot of meat on me, and I wasn't looking forward to going out and sitting in the cold. So I decided I'd just try it, and I'd much rather be next to the heater and put up with a bit of religious talk than go outside. So I tried it, and I was just really blown away about the basic teachings of the Baha'i Faith, and they all made sense to me, whereas the things in a lot of other, perhaps, religions didn't quite add up to me. And I just, it was a real shock that religion could be beautiful, it could make sense, and be relevant to today. So
This is quite a big change for someone at high school age to make this sort of choice and this sort of journey. How was your family about that?
Well, at first, because I found the Baha'i Faith so fascinating that, and I didn't become a Baha'i straight away. I spent a year or so reading about 50 books on the Baha'i Faith. Because it was just so fascinating, I must admit, all my sort of other leisure activities disappeared, and that took their place. Studying the Baha'i Faith took their place, and my mother was a little bit concerned that was influencing my studies, and so she wasn't comfortable with the Baha'i Faith to begin with. But once she saw, how it was affecting me, and she got to know it a little bit better. Eventually, she realised that this was a positive thing, and that that there was good to be gained from it, really.
And so then where did your journey go after that? I mean, you went to high school, you had joined this Baha'i Faith, and what did you do?
Well, to be honest, once I became a Baha'i, I had a lot of Christians, friends of mine, who were very, very concerned about where I was headed. And so they were showing me things from the Bible that sort of seemed to be in conflict with some Baha'i teachings, which is very confusing for me, because as a Baha'i, we believe that Jesus is the Son of God, and that Baha'u'llah is also a messenger of God. So I couldn't really reconcile these two different things. So I got so confused about certain issues, to be honest, that I actually decided I had to go to Israel to sort out my problem. So that was a big time in my life, for sure. And I already had my degree in English at that point, but I was really working towards going to Israel and sorting out the problem once and for all.
And so is this where you started your writing a book? Because you must have taken that journey now, and you've written a book related to that topic?
That's right. I mean, when I first started writing the book about Christianity and the Baha'i Faith, the aim was really to show one point of view about the Bible, and that was all. And as I started to come across different views about the Bible from different Christian groups, from Seventh-day Adventists, from Catholics, from Baptists and so on, I started to get this feel that the whole world, in a sense, was in a conflict over the Bible. And I decided that perhaps it would be good to show different people's perspectives on the Bible, and to use that to help me resolve my questions about it.
So was that your first book?
That was my first. That's the first book I started writing, and it took 16 years to complete. But it's not the first book that was published.
And so what's the title of that book?
That's called Amaze in Grace.
Oh. And so, and in Israel, of course, there's the holy places for many different religions. Many Christian holy places are there, Jewish, Muslim, and the Baha'i. So was that a part of your journey visiting these places?
Abdu'l-Baha, who was the son of Baha'u'llah, prophet founder of the Baha'i Faith, said that we must not forget Christ. And he recommended that for Baha'is who go to Israel, that they visit the holy places that Jesus went to, and the places that were associated with his life. So when I was in Israel, I stopped in at Jerusalem, of course, and visited some of the places that were important to Christianity. And it was, Israel was a perfect place for me to go to in that sense, because, it was the home of Christianity, but it's also where the world center of the Baha'i Faith is now. So I could really, I was right in the middle of this place of religious history.
Yeah, so it's not even just research by books. You went there and felt it and had a spiritual journey.
Definitely, yeah.
So, well, let's talk about your books now. So that's one of your books. Tell me about one of your other books that you've written.
Well, there's another one called Whatever You Do, Don't Smile. And that's about happiness, of course, and all sorts of emotional issues like anger and stress and love and fear, and also about how to make a difference to the world, really. So it covers a lot of life in 200 odd pages.
Can you give us any secrets as to
Ooh.
About smiling?
Smiling. Well, I think that music and singing is a very, very important part of happiness. And I've heard there's a guy called Zafar Smith who went to Papua New Guinea on a Baha'i trip, and he said that he was just surrounded by music and song all the time. And he said eventually, it started influencing his dreams, and he would be dreaming about flowers and love and peace and skipping and stuff like this. So, whereas in Western culture we have a lot of music, but we don't necessarily have a lot of singing and making our own music. And that's something that's becoming more and more important in the Baha'i Faith as well.
So one secret from his book, music. You have to read the rest. And so then what's your third book? Because you've done 3.
Yeah, there's another one called Navigating Love, which is essentially about relationships and dealing with heartache and breakups and that kind of thing. And also about how, you need to find your purpose in love, because if you don't have a purpose for relationships, then you're likely to go through a lot, I think. And once you're both clear on each other's purpose in the relationship, you can go forward and work on that together.
And so now I've also attended a seminar that you've given about stress. And so is that material from your books, or is that a new area you're working on? What do you do at your seminars?
Yeah, the stress workshop was pretty much based on the whatever you do, don't smile thing. So it's looking at thoughts that we have that create stress for ourselves, and replacing them with much funkier thoughts. Because stress is a really, really big problem in our society, and it's affecting happiness, it's affecting relationships, it's affecting young people and how they feel about themselves and stuff like that.
I like that, funkier thoughts.
Yeah.
Kia ora, if you've just joined us, you're watching Baha'i on Air. And in this episode, we're talking to a young-ish Baha'i who's a comedian, an actor, a teacher, and an author. And we're talking about his books and all the amazing things that he writes about and his journey into becoming a Baha'i. This is Jamie Banks. And we're here in Hamilton at our annual Baha'i Summer School, and it's lovely and warm. So we were talking about your stress seminars that you give, and I just wondered if you could tell everyone what you do in those.
I do some things like we look at thoughts that really increase people's stress levels.
Some of the things that do influence our stress, our diet. Okay, if we're not eating in a certain way, we're obviously going to get tired, and therefore that's going to put pressure on the way or on how we feel. Okay, we don't function at our peak. It stops us from thinking clearly. Exercise, okay, is a pretty obvious one. If we don't exercise properly, then obviously we're going to have increased stress. Procrastination.
Like, for example, a lot of people get stressed out because they procrastinate. And if you look behind the thinking of procrastination, it's the idea that, well, it'll be more fun if I do it later. But actually, of course, it isn't. And instead, you've actually made it the rest of your life a sort of more an anxious life because you're conscious that you have to do this thing, and you just, you take this with you throughout the rest of the day. So another thing we do is I divide people into groups and give them various situations as to how they would deal with their stress. And it's interesting because often I take some of the groups out and I say, look, I want you to come up with the most creative, imaginative way of dealing with this stressful situation. And then we put them back into the groups. And invariably, those groups have a much, much more interesting, dynamic, powerful way of dealing with the stress, with that situation, than the other groups who I haven't given the suggestion of creativity and imagination to. So it's amazing, if you have some sort of difficulty with stress, sometimes it's just a matter of saying, well, how can I deal with this in an imaginative, creative, fun way? Is that a possibility here? And once you explore that and maybe get ideas from your friends on that and consult, then you're away with the fairies pretty much.
Excellent. Now, you're also a teacher, and I know you have a lot of interest in working with young people. If you can talk about that a bit.
Yeah, I work particularly with kids on detention. So another book that I'm writing at the moment is called Detention Seekers. And so I'm really, really concerned about what's going on with detention in schools, because there are a lot of schools out there which still have this sort of method of putting students in a room and getting them to be completely silent for 40 minutes, either doing nothing or sitting there copying lines. And those kids, as far as I'm aware, don't get anything out of that process at all, and that's why they keep going back to detention on and over and over again. And so I've been trialling some new strategies and techniques at the school that I'm working at, which is really workshopping ideas with them, making them realize how powerful they are and how they can influence the people around them. For example, we had one discussion where the kids looked at how much money they were spending on junk food each week, and they were pretty shocked, and they were also pretty shocked about how much sugar they were putting into their system. And so we thought we had a look at, well, how many children could you sponsor with that amount of money that you're spending? And they realized that they could literally save lives if they put their hearts and minds into it. So I'm trying a lot of different stuff with them to try and get them to open their eyes to themselves and to what's going on in the world, and give them a sense of purpose and help them realize that as teachers, we're out there to help them. We're not the big enemy. And
And so how do the Baha'i teachings or principles or ideas fit in with what you do or inspire some of your great ideas?
Particularly in regards to education, Baha'u'llah says that we should regard man as a mine rich in gems of inestimable value. And he says that only education can really reveal those things inside. So when I go into a room with kids on detention, I imagine that there are gems inside these kids that are of inestimable value. And that helps me teach in a way that's enthusiastic, that they sense from me that I regard them and what they have, the gifts that they have, as being really important, and for everyone in the world, not just themselves or their families or their friends, but for the whole community as well.
So you're not a teacher, you're a gold digger.
You could say that.
The other thing I wanted to ask you about is what do you feel that the Baha'i teachings have to offer people? What do they have to offer to the world?
Well, it would be easy to say, what don't they have to offer? I think that the world is very confused and it's very negative, particularly in terms of world events. People feel that the world is getting worse. And what's amazing about the Baha'i view of things is that Shoghi Effendi, the guardian of the Baha'i Faith from 1921 to 1957, he explained that the world is undergoing two processes. And on the one hand, the old world is collapsing, which is causing a lot of chaos and confusion, and people are getting sort of withdrawal symptoms from that, and communities are starting to feel like they've lost identity and so on. And that can result in fanaticism, it can result in war, it can result in a lot of different things. But on the other hand, there is a new civilization that's being born. And we know that, there are certain issues where we're better now than we were before, in a better position, whether it's to do with the rights of women, whether it's to do with the rights of minorities in the world. There's still a lot of work to do, but people don't understand, for example, even war. The percentage of the world that's currently involved in war is far less than it's ever been in the past. In fact, wars between nations aren't really occurring. We're more seeing wars between groups within nations, which is a process Baha'u'llah talked or predicted would happen. He said we need to reduce armaments just to the extent that we can deal with problems within our own countries. And today, this is pretty much what we're seeing. So I think Baha'is, when they look at the news, when they look at the things around them, they're not bothered by that. They just see that as a natural process. But the media isn't reporting the slow growth of this new world order or this new way of thinking. And that's a shame that other people miss out on seeing that happening. But definitely changes in the air.
One thing I wanted to ask you that, you're still relatively young, and I know a lot of these amazing things you've done when you were young, and you sort of translated your youthful questions and energy into searches and research and creative outputs like books and comedy performances. Just wondering what advice you have to young people on how to traverse these crazy waters.
Boy, I think the first thing is to look around themselves and to go for support if they're in some kind of trouble, because often it can be a next door neighbour, it can be someone else at our school, it can be someone in our religious community who has exactly what we're looking for. And if we just keep what's going on to ourselves, we may never realise that they have the particular secret that we're looking for. And the teenage years in particular are really, really rough. You've got hormones raging, you've got peers who are not always that supportive because they've got their own stuff going on, and it's a really, really rough ride. But I mean, I myself, I'll be quite honest with you, like I had terrible depression and anxiety for years, and it was so bad I couldn't even ring my best friend. I was too nervous to talk to him. It was incredibly debilitating. But I kept at it, and I kept looking for new answers. But to begin with, I just did the same old stuff every day, and it didn't work. It didn't get me anywhere, but I kept doing it, right? But eventually, I went out there and looked for answers. I read books. I read Baha'i books. I read books by psychologists. And I immersed myself in people who are really, really switched on. And eventually I learned enough that I could then help others. So if you're going through any problems in your life, don't worry, because eventually if you find out enough about how to deal with them, you'll be in a really amazing position to help other people. But you just have to hang in there. And sometimes it just takes a couple of weeks, and sometimes it's a couple of months, and sometimes it's 10, 15 years. But once you get there, you'll be so glad that you toughed it out, I think.
So, Jamie, if someone wants to contact you or get a hold of some of your books or have you give some seminars, how do they find you?
Well, they are available in some Whitcoulls stores, so you can just give Whitcoulls a call and see which stores in your area have them available. Also, I have a website, which is www.jamiebanksnz.com, which they can connect to a link to my publishers through as well. So there's a couple of options there.
Okay, by profession I teach sometimes, and I'm also a writer, and my first interview on Simon Dello today, that part wasn't the joke, well, it wasn't really that good, to be honest. I was sort of like, so I hear you write books, and I was like, oh, was my keyboard that loud? And then, anyway, what's your first book about? Oh yeah, it's sort of about 200 pages, I guess. And also I write poems about being single. Okay, and I've been writing poems about being single for about 3 years. Yeah, and can I just get an idea? Hands up if you're a single guy out there. Just hands up, please. Hands up high. Okay, girls, look around. There's a lot of. Okay, see, there's a lot of talent on stage, but there's also a lot of talent out there. Okay, now, and while we're on the topic. Hands up if you're a girl and you're single. Hands up high, please. Okay. Just keep those hands up high, please. Yep. Okay, so, oh yeah, just a little bit longer. Yeah, thanks, cool. Okay, so guys, yeah, make sure you take a note of those people and you don't talk to them tonight because it's a bit early, it'd be a bit obvious, you know, and plus there's a lot of really mystical pressures on us and it's hard to be happy, okay? So if you've prayed and you've done all the spiritual things that, you know, you ought to do to be happy and it still doesn't work, there's one special trick I have. You just imagine somebody holding a bag of nachos. Okay? And then once you've done that, you sing this song. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Nacho, nacho man. I wanna be a nacho man. Nacho, nacho, nacho man. I wanna eat some nachos. Okay? And it works, it makes you smile. Honestly, I've tried this several times. At least twice, anyway. Yeah, and speaking of Japan, I have to add that Japan is one of the coolest places in the world. And the reason is that, you know, you guys have heard of a washing machine, right? I know some of you young fellas are like, oh, you put the clothes in the basket and then they miraculously appear on your bed. There's this intermediary stage called a washing machine that we use nowadays, okay? And actually, while we're on that topic, how many guys have not used a washing machine in 2008? Can you please, because I have, in New Zealand, I've never seen a guy use a washing machine, seriously. This is very, very scary, you know, equality of men and women, people. Okay, now anyway, back to the washing machine thing. So basically, if you're in Japan and you pick up the phone and you say, washing machine, nobody notices anything strange. And the reason is that when you pick up the phone in Japan, you're supposed to say, moshi moshi. So if you go, washing machine, they don't notice the difference. They hear you say, washing machine, and they go, oh, moshi moshi. Okay? There is no other country in the world where you can pick up the phone and say washing machine and people think it's normal. And that's how cool Japan is.
Well, thank you very much. We've been talking to Jamie Banks and he's been sharing some of his great insights and ideas. And we've seen his seminars and his books and his comedy. And we'd like to thank you for joining us here at Baha'i Summer School. And keep watching Baha'i on Air. Ka kite.